have in Wallboard. So with Power BI, as I said, this is a visualization of data, and we're able to then bring that into Wallboard and interact with that data. Within Power BI, there are three different types of information that we can bring in. We can bring in dashboards. A dashboard is a collection of data which we can visualize, kind of like what we're seeing here, but a little bit different. We have reports, which is exactly what we're seeing here. And a report actually allows us to interact with that data. So if I want to view a specific data point, I can click into that report and it will now start filtering the data. So I'm only looking at what's relevant. And then there's a tile. So think of a specific data point that's within a dashboard, like as you see here where it says number of customers, that would be a specific tile. So bringing in just a single data point. So let's go ahead and take a look at our Power BI widget. So I'm going to click here, and this brings up our Power BI widget. So you're going to see a couple different things here within our Power BI widget. It's going to ask embed type. These are those options that I was just talking about. So a dashboard, a report, and a tile. Now, how are we exactly bringing this information in from Power BI? So with Power BI, this is all now authenticated. So what you may see with different solutions is that these different types of reports, dashboards, and tiles, it's not authenticated. It's more of a screenshot, and then that's publicly available, and then that's being sort of embedded into the presentation that's displaying on the screen. However, in this case, we're authenticating with a token. So for example, we're just authenticating with Microsoft. So we're just using your Office account to go ahead and pull those reports in. And we have a very easy way of being able to authenticate. And so I'll show you what that looks like. It's just a couple steps. So once I've done that, I can also select what tenant I'm bringing that in. So the tenant is just me in this case because it's my Power BI account. We're going to select a workspace. So you can have multiple workspaces if you're familiar with Power BI within your Power BI account. This is a workspace is essentially just a collection of reports, dashboards, and tiles. So just where we're housing everything. And then there's a report. So depending on if you selected a dashboard, a tile, or a report, this is where we can pick exactly which one we want to see. So in this case, as you can see here, I could bring in a sales and marketing report. So look at some of these options here. And one thing that we're going to notice is that over here on the left-hand side, I have some buttons. So we're going to get into this here in a moment, but basically what I've been able to do is, of course, I can bring in these Power BI, this Power BI widget and reports, but with Wallboard, we can also make interactive presentations. So for example, if I press on this sales and marketing button, I'm then going to view my sales and marketing report. Same with opportunity analysis. So if you see here in my layers panel, I actually have 3 Power BI widgets. So again, within Wallboard, right, the whole system interacts with itself. So if I were to press here on sales and marketing, we're really just doing 2 actions. We're hiding the rest of these reports here, and we're showing the one that is relevant. So let's go ahead and preview the Power BI widget. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this now. So as you can see, our Power BI report is now loading up in the center here. Just give it a second. We do have to visualize this data. So as I mentioned with Power BI, this is all interactive. So in the case of a report, I can now start interacting with some of these options here on the side. So if I have a touch screen, for example, I can click up here and I want to view, let's say, profitability metrics based on Andrew here. So now the whole report is shifting based on something that I've clicked on. So again, this is where we're doing something a little different than just viewing a static screenshot of a Power BI report. I'm actually able to interact with it and change how it looks. So I could click on other options here. And as you see, each time I'm doing this, the data is just shifting. So remember when I talked about interactivity and how I've set up these buttons? So I'm just showing and hiding different Power BI widgets depending on which report or dashboard I want to show. So in this case, I'm now going to click on my sales and marketing report. And now it brings up my sales and marketing report. So With this, again, I not only have those, those sort of toggles that I could click on and start shifting how the data looks. I can also start viewing and navigating between different pages of these reports. So I can go to the year to date category, and now we're going to bring in information like this. And I can continue to keep viewing other pieces of information here. So again, whether I'm interacting with the reports in Wallboard and I'm setting up button presses to be able to change the report I'm viewing, or if I just want to click into the report and then start toggling what we're seeing, like so, I can do that as well. This also creates a unique use case because let's say, right, I have a video wall, for example. I don't have a touchscreen video wall, but what I can do is if I have Wallboard installed on, like, let's say an Android tablet, for example, I could set up buttons just like this, and I would instead use webhooks to communicate from one device to another. So, for example, if I clicked on a button on the tablet, it would communicate with the content that's running on the video wall, and then it would start changing what report I'm viewing. So again, this is one of the benefits of Wallboard and being able to interact with the entire system, not just this single report here. So next, I'm going to go ahead and go over to the next page in the content here. And this would be the example of a dashboard. So as I said, we're essentially just visualizing the data. I can't actually click into this report now. I can start, showing lines like this and so forth and start looking at data points. But I can't like toggle the data like we saw previously. It's more for just visualization purposes. On the next screen, what we're going to see here is the tiles. So you see here where we have our total volume and market share, for example. I can now go ahead and view these individually with our tiles. Now, this goes ahead and allows us to create more, let's say, dynamic content or more, let's say, visually pleasing. So if I now click over on the next screen here, just give it a second to load in. And there we are. So now you could see I have a nice content here, looks very visually pleasing, and I'm just bringing in those individual tiles that will go ahead and update as they recalculate information. So as you can see, many different ways that we can visualize this data, but this is just what is possible within our Power BI widget. So I'm going to go ahead and click out of this. But that is going to be it for our Power BI widget. What I do want to show you though is how we can go ahead and add your Power BI account to Wallboard and authenticate with that token. So let me go ahead and show you it. Again, it's very simple. So I'm going to click here, go back to our home page. I'm going to click on settings. And if I click on this toggle to the left, it now brings up the rest of my setting panels. So I'm going to go ahead and click into cloud integration. You can see we work with Google, but in the case of Power BI, it's a Microsoft product. And you can see here, here's the Power BI account that I was using. So that is what I was referencing when I was bringing in all those reports. If I click on Add New, I can go ahead and type in, let's say John's Power BI. We'll say version 2. And now, again, you just select Personal here. And then for scope, we're not referencing OneDrive or a calendar, but we're referencing Power BI. Now, when I click authenticate, the reason why you're not going to see much happen here, you're just going to see authentication successful, is because if you are logged into your Office account, your Microsoft account within your web browser, it's automatically going to detect that you are logged in, and it's going to go ahead and automatically authenticate. If you weren't logged in, for example, when I click this, you would see that it would take me to a Microsoft login page, similar if you've used SSO or something like that in the past. And it's just going to authenticate that way. But I'm already logged in, so when I click this, we should see authentication successful and my new credential has been added. So very simple, as you can see. If you're already signed into Office, it only takes a couple of seconds. So let's go ahead and remove that here. And we're going to go back to our home page. Next, we're going to be transitioning into our meeting room solution. So if you remember, I mentioned that with this new meeting room solution, it's now more native. And what I mean by that is in the past, of course, we were able to bring in information from O365 and Google Calendar. However, we were using a third-party software to be able to change that data. So like, for example, how do I sort my current events? How do I sort, events that are currently happening, things like that. So that's what we're going to see here. We're going to see that I can now more fine tune that data. So basically meaning that if I only want to see today's events or current events, I can then go ahead and bring that into the presentation. Another thing, since it is native, it is a more reliable solution. So it's 100% wallboard. So we are able to change more things about it than we would with a third-party software. So I'm going to go ahead and click into this meeting room dashboard. So again, I just want to say when we're talking about our meeting room solution and how we're now, organizing that information on the back end, this isn't just for a meeting room solution. While that is the most common, it can also be used for any time we're listing event data. So if I just want to show today's events, I could use it for that. It doesn't necessarily have to be for meeting room scheduling and things like that. However, in this content example, this is a dashboard. So imagine I had like a conference center and I had 8 conference rooms or meeting rooms. And so that's what I'm seeing here. Imagine this was on a very large screen and I could see the status of meetings that are going on in each of those rooms. As you can see here, this room is busy. That's because we have the 1.10 webinar that's going on right now. So we'll go into a second here how we bring in this data. But first, I want to show you our data source mappers. And this is what we use to natively sort the information that we're bringing in, let's say from O365 or Google Calendar. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click on this here. And I'm going to go to my content properties. And this is where we can edit our data source mappers. So as you can see, I already have some data source mappers in here. One thing I do want to mention though, before we start talking about what we're exactly doing here, another thing that makes this a huge benefit that this is a native solution is that it's running within the Wallboard application. Again, we're not communicating to any third-party services. So one of the things that is very, very helpful is that we no longer have to worry about time zone issues. Again, that was something that you would have to manually set within the editor. But now we're just reading the time zone off the device itself because it has the Wallboard application installed and it's native. So if you're dealing with daylight savings time and things like that, it's definitely going to make that a lot easier. So as we can see here, this is a example of a completed data source mapper. So if we look here, I have current events, I have today's events, and we have a couple different templates that you can use to bring in certain information from, let's say, your O365 calendar or a Google Calendar. So if I click on this plus button, it's now going to say select a calculator. If I click on it, these are those sort of templated options that I was mentioning. So this allows us to fine tune that data because when we bring in, let's say, information from an O365 calendar, it's really just showing us events 1 to 1,000, depending on how many, meetings you have lined up into the future. So if I come here, I could bring in my full calendar, but that's not really what I want to do. I want to bring in specific information. So I already brought in current today's events. Maybe I want to see tomorrow's events. So I'll click here. It's now going to ask me to reference a data source. There we are. And now you can see the source option is blank. So I need to select what data source I'm bringing in. So for those of you who are familiar with our data sources already, this is where we would bring in our O365 calendar. Similar in Power BI, how we created a credential and authenticated, we do the exact same thing with O365. There are just a few more steps involved just because you could have multiple calendars within that account, but now it's a lot easier with this solution. So now that I have that selected, we'll see where this now appears. So I'm going to click Save. And so if you've ever done data binding within Wallboard, you'll know that I could bring in something, let's say like a text widget, like we're seeing here, and I can now bind that from a data source, meaning that anytime that a cell in a data source changes, we're going to change it within our content. So this is perfect for a meeting room solution where events and current events are changing constantly. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to go to my widget properties, and I'm going to go to bind to data. Previously, if you use this solution, you would see here that it just goes ahead and sorts the data, but now we have custom fields. Custom fields is going to be how we're going to bring in all of that data that we just saw, so those data source mappers. So if I click on today's events here, right? Previously, we had current events and today events, but now we have tomorrow events, which I just added. So now I would essentially be able to go through and look through my various meetings that I have coming up. So I'm actually going to click on the title here of the meeting because it's a little bit easier to view, but this will go ahead and show you. So as you can see, I had our 1.10 webinar here, and now I've just essentially selected the title. But again, because we're authenticating, we can bring in very granular information that we maybe wouldn't be able to necessarily use with other data sources. So I can bring in things like the description of the meeting, the organizer, or who's even attending, and then the start and end date, of course. So this is just an example of our meeting room solution. Right now, again, we're just seeing a dashboard, but think about we could also show things like a meeting room tablet that's actually sitting outside of each room. And we'll do something very similar here to where we're showing red if it's booked, green if it's not booked. So with these custom data source mappers, it makes it a lot easier. Additionally, even if you're not using, let's say, Google or O365, we can bring in, let's say, custom data sources. So if you're using some external database like an event management system, data source mappers makes that a lot easier to work with because Google and Microsoft already sort a lot of that information. So it allows you to do a lot of that filtering in Wallboard. So enough here with our meeting room directory here, but I just wanted to show you how we've done this new change and how it's a more native solution. And next, what we're going to get into is going to be our media widget. So I'm just going to click out of the content here, and I'm going to click into this content here. So with our media widget, this is probably one of the more exciting things that has been released since I've been here at Wallboard, and I really think it's going to sort of set the stage for what the future of digital signage is. Now, when I'm saying that, I'm talking about our media widget that you will find under the media category, and it's right here. We can actually see that we have a image and description media widget. And so if I click on it, you can see that it's just the description, and this one's the image. But with this media widget, essentially what we're doing is we're taking feeds such as an RSS media feed, or again, we could bring in things from other data sources, but I would say an RSS media feed is very common with the media widget. And so what we're able to do is we're able to bring in, let's say, images, videos, descriptions, titles that are all sort of sorted within the metadata of those data sources. And so we'll see how to set this all up and what we're currently viewing here. But it's very, very easy to create these RSS feeds with an application called rss.app. And so we'll get into that here in a moment. But as you can see here, as I'm talking, we're scrolling through different pieces of information. Now, I said an RSS media feed, but what could that really be? That could be anything from social media. It could, so in this case, we're seeing National Geographic's Instagram page, and it's just scrolling through their posts. And so if I actually bring in this here, you can see that these are some of the images that we've already seen. So we're just pulling those from their Instagram page here. Additionally, we could bring in things like think of other RSS feeds, news sites. So if we want to bring in CNN, which we will see later, or any other news platform, we can now bring that in using the media widget. And so we make that very simple. The last one is we could also bring in things like custom data sources or company blogs, for example. And so we'll see bringing in a Wallboard blog here in a moment. But these are just all examples of information that we could bring into your digital signage and now have it update automatically without manual intervention. It's essentially set it and forget it. One last thing I'd like to mention about our media widget. If you're familiar with Wallboard, you know that we have a lot of properties that we can use. If you just see me scroll through the properties here on the media widget, you can see that there are many different properties that I can alter. Now, I know there are a lot of properties here, but the whole point of this is that you essentially have a widget that is a one-stop shop and is fully customizable, so you can make it look exactly how you would like. So that is what we're doing here within our media widget. So let's go ahead and take a look at our media widget here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on main, and I'm going to click on bind to data. So this is our data picker. So again, if you've done any sort of data binding, we saw something like this when we were looking at our meeting room solution. Our data picker is what allows us to sort through the different types of our data. So if I come down here, you can see I've selected a data source, and I could select different types of data sources. In this case, this National Geographic Instagram, it's actually using, again, that program I called RSS.app. It's a cloud service, and we'll get to that in a minute. But again, you could use other data sources as well. Now, since this is a RSS media feed, and again, it's coming from RSS.app, as soon as you pick your data source, it's going to automatically populate all the information here into these various fields. Now, what are these fields? So again, as I said, we're bringing in information from an RSS media feed. So if I click here on, like, let's say description, which is what we saw on the right-hand side of this content, I could say, well, what do I want to pull into the description field here? Well, obviously this is from RSS.app, so we know exactly what the titles are or the headers of the metadata. But in this case, I said, well, if I bring in the description, I want to see the description. For media, I bring in media. The media, again, could be the image or the video. So really all you're doing is you're just saying, what types of media do I want to bring in, or what types of information do I want to be bound to these headers here? And we'll see where these correspond into our settings here in a moment. And then we can also toggle skip uncompleted, basically meaning if you have something like we've just seen here, and let's say you had a blog, for example, that didn't have a picture, we would just skip over that blog completely because it doesn't fit the format of this content, right? Where we have the image and the description. So hopefully this will make a little bit more sense here in a second. But if I scroll down into properties, and we'll go over more of these here, you'll see that I've selected media over here on the left-hand side, and on the right side, I've selected description and title. So again, right where we just saw those headers that we were bringing in, these now correspond with what we want to display. So I could technically bring in a single media widget, and it would show everything that we're showing here. So the title, the description, and the image. And it shows that by default. But with these settings, this is where we get the ability to customize and sort of change exactly how we want this to look. So enough talking about what this is capable of. Let's actually change this content here so we can see that those changes be reflected, and then we can also see some of the properties that we can use to change up our presentation. So let's go ahead and go into rss.app here. So here we are. So this is the web page, rss.app. I would highly recommend, if you plan on using the media widget, that you sign up for rss.app. They do have a free version that you can use, and you can just take a look at their different subscription plans. But again, if you're using the free version, I think you get 2 RSS feeds that you can generate for free. But you can also you sign up for a more advanced account where you can get more feeds that are accessible to you. But what is RSS.app? RSS.app essentially allows us to take URLs, and then it scrapes that data from that web page, and it sorts it into those headers that we saw previously. So it pulls the title of the article, and it knows that this is the title. It pulls the image, basically knowing that this is the image that is related to that article. So we'll see that here in one moment. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in our blog. So really quick here, let's just go ahead and take a look at our blog page, and we'll notice some images here. We'll notice some images here. And for example, this would be the title of something we would bring in via rss.app. This would be the image. And if I clicked into the article, of course, we would see, our description and so forth. So this would be an example of the description that rss.app would read. So I'm just going to click back out here. And so now I'm going to take this web page URL, and I'm going to go back to rss.app, and now I'm going to paste it. Before I click generate, as you can see, there are a lot of different options here. So I'm just showing you the Wallboard blog, but as I said, we could bring in social media like you see here. We could bring in news feeds, CNN, New York Times, etc. Even custom data sources. As you can see, I'm scrolling. There's a lot of different options. So I'm going to click generate. And so here we go. So now it's essentially letting us look, okay, this is how the information is going to be brought in. So this is the title, the image, and the description. So there you go. Those are articles that we just saw. And now I'm going to go ahead and save it to my feeds. Now that I have this, we can do some more things in RSS.app. So one thing you may think with social media is, well, I don't want to show everything. What if I'm bringing in things like hashtags, or what if I'm bringing in, like, let's say we have a company blog, but we have blogs that aren't specifically meant for to be displayed on the digital signage. Well, I could use filters. Now, this filtering allows me to basically allow or disallow what I want to show. So I could say that if there's no images, then I don't even want to bring that wallboard into the RSS feed. Same with descriptions and dates. So this ensures that there's consistency with the data source that you're going to bring into wallboard. I could even blacklist certain keywords. So, for example, if let's say I had articles that weren't meant for the digital signage, let's say they were like Tech Tips Tuesdays or something like that, I could type that into blacklist, add that keyword, and it would go ahead and hide that. So that would automate some of the filtering here. I can of course also come in here and I could individually hide articles. So if I'm like, I don't want that to be shown on the signage, I don't want that to be shown on the signage, I could manually have that done here like you just saw. And then they have other things like, I want to go ahead and clean up the title. This is enabled by default, and it really does help removing very repetitive words like wallboard blog that we see here repeatedly. And I could even go ahead and hide old posts. So if you don't want to bring in like data that's, months old, well, I could just go ahead and toggle this, and now we'll show various articles that are, let's say, 7 days old or whatever I said here. So now that we've done this, I just go back to overview. I now copy this, and now we need to take this back into Wallboard and use this as an RSS feed. So I'm going to click here. So I'm going to now click on bind to data, go back to the data picker. Again, this is how we sort through the information. So I'm going to click on that one more time here. I'm also now going to click here on add and manage data sources. This is going to take us to our data sources menu. Remember, this looks kind of familiar here. We clicked on cloud integration previously. I'm now clicking on data sources. I can now click on add new, use existing URL. I go ahead and change this to RSS feed. So I'm basically just saying this is the type of information I'm bringing in. And I could just say wallboard blog. How often do I want to refresh it? So how often do I want to bring in new data from RSS.app? I'm just going to leave it at 300 seconds. And I'm going to paste that URL in. We also have some new options that you may find within our data sources. So these are very helpful because since again, we're trying to automate our presentation, we don't want to include information that is, let's say, like a broken link, or let's say that there's now new information that we don't want to include. This is what this is helpful for. So cache external sources, this is perfect because if I toggle this, now let's say, right, I have images and text that I'm bringing in. Well, that's going to be cached to the media player. So even if your media player goes offline, we're still going to keep showing that presentation with the data that we previously cached. So let's say it disconnects, it's been a week, it's been offline. Well, the articles that it's going to show are going to be, a week old because it's still playing that cached material. Of course, once it connects back to the internet, we're then going to go ahead and bring in the most recent articles. And I could do more things like remove the broken external resource references. That's a long phrase, but really all it means is if a external resource fails to cache, we're just going to go ahead and delete it in the data source. So I'm going to check that as well. Rotate cache on every update. Again, this just ensures that things are immediately deleted from the storage if, let's say, it's not found when we refresh our data 300 seconds later. So if we don't want to have old data, so I'm going to toggle that as well. And then this one as well, this is for more advanced use cases, but if you're using, let's say, a custom RSS feed or like a custom data source, it allows us to be able to map, let's say, images that are coming from our file manager. So if, we have like, I don't know, like apple.png and apple and, .png is in a data source, we'll just go ahead and load that. So a little bit more for complicated examples, so we're just going to leave this one not checked. And so now if I click save, we're going to go here and search for our Wallboard blog. And if I just refresh my data sources here, if I click on the eye icon, you can now see that this is all that information that we're bringing in. So now if I go back into my National Geographic content, I'm just going to go back to my home page here, scroll down and click on it here. Just give it a second here. Now let's start customizing it. So very simple. I'm going to click here on this image. I'm going to click on bind to data. It's going to take us into our data picker. Again, remember, like I said, with RSS.app, we're going to automatically populate everything into these fields down here. So I could select Wallboard blog. And as you can see, some of the information changed here, but it's still the same here because, again, we're using RSS.app. So if I press save, there's the images from our Wallboard blog that it's bringing in. I think my internet might just be a little slow right now. Same here for the description. I'm going to click on bind to data. I'm going to come in here into my data sources, and we're going to select Wallboard blog. I can find it. There it is. And I'm going to press save. Great. Now we're bringing in our title and our description. Now I'm going to go ahead and customize this. This isn't with the media widget, but again, shows you how easy it is to customize. So we're going to go ahead and bring in a Wallboard logo. And I'll just bring in this one right here. Give it a second. There we are. So we'll bring in that. And I can come down here and I can say we're going to be bringing this in from wallboard.us. And I'm going to change this icon to say that we're referencing it from a web page, not Instagram. So as we can see, there we are. We now have this logo here. And so now what we can do is we can change a couple more things, but I'm going to keep it like this. But I do want to show you just a couple more settings that are very helpful with the media widget. We can do this for various different orientations. So you can see that I can, use a sliding animation, a continuous slider, and a collage. We'll go into these here in a moment. I can also change the orientation. So of course, it's on auto right now, so it will auto adjust depending on what the screen is. But as you can see, I could manually set that up if I'd like. I could also determine how the media would fit in this case. So if I didn't want to cut off the image and if I wanted it to see all of it, I could change that. And then of course, how frequent do I want to rotate through the articles? How long do I want the animation to take? What do I want the animation to look like when I'm going from one piece of information to the other? So some of these are helpful for creating different effects. So as we can see, we just saw a fade animation because it's set to fade. And then of course we have styling. So do I want my media to be rounded? So I could round this image here. Content padding. Do I want to go ahead and add margins to this, etc.? Dynamic font size. Now this is very, very helpful because as you can see with this, you could have blogs that have a very long description, a long title, but that may not necessarily fit here. So I could say I want to bring in dynamic font. And then so depending on how much text is on the page, it's going to go ahead and resize it automatically. And then again, we can determine what information we want to bring in. So if I didn't want to include the title, I just disable it and I'm no longer bringing in the title. Also, I know for some of our European partners, I know there are some laws and regulations that require if you're showing something from a web page, you need to go ahead and show the URL of where it's coming from. If you click that here, it now shows it at the bottom and it's going to start rotating through that. So I'm just going to uncheck this. And you can even see we sort of give a disclaimer here. I'm going to enable that. And if I go to our other properties, of course, just like with any other Wallboard widget, I can change how I want the font to look. I can add drop shadows, other styling, formatting. I can even come in here and make character limits. So if you don't like how we resize the text because maybe you have articles that have very few text and then ones that have a lot, maybe you want a consistent font size, you can go ahead and limit the character amount here. So we won't just show all that information. That's why we're seeing the ... here because we're essentially cutting off the description. So that's all I wanted to show here for the media widget, but as you can see, it can be used for a lot of different use cases. So for the grand finale, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to see all the different applications that the media widget can be used for, and I'm going to talk through them. So I'm going to click here on this content, and I'm going to go ahead and preview this. So as we can see, we have a scrolling ticker here on the bottom. This is an example of a custom data source being used in the media widget. So this is actually all being pulled from a Google Sheet. So I found a Google Sheet template that allows you to bring in stock information. So right now, everything that you're seeing is the NASDAQ, and it's going to go ahead and continually update throughout the day as soon as a price changes. So right, we saw how I could have the RSS widget, change or refresh every 300 seconds or 30 seconds. The same applies here to ensure that we have accurate stock prices. So this is just an example of our slider option for the media widget because it's sliding through our different media widgets. So this is the image, for example, this is the title, and this is the description. I just changed what information I wanted to go into those headers that we saw previously. So now we're going to transition here into the next page. So this is an example of social media. There's actually a lot more going on here, though, than what we're probably seeing. So here we're seeing that image like we saw before. We're also seeing the title and the description of the social media post. So in this case, of course, it's Instagram. And we're also bringing this in from the TechCrunch Instagram. But notice we also have some cards here behind. These are also rotating. As you can see right here, you may have noticed that that just kind of jumped or transitioned into another image. I'm using collage mode, so it's just doing a collage, as you can see, and it's rotating out its pictures and changing the order of them to make it look just a little bit more dynamic. So this is just to look cool, but there are definitely different applications that this can be used for, the collage mode. So we're just going to see this, rotate through a couple different pieces of information here. But I mean, the same would apply for Facebook, Twitter, all the sort. And this is going to be our Wallboard blog. So this is a little bit more of a stylized version that I set up prior to the webinar that wasn't done live. So as you can see, I've even now added a QR code. So when you scan that, it will take you to our Wallboard blog where you can read more about the articles that you see that are scrolling here. Again, this is the image, this is the title, and this is the description. And now we're also seeing a slide animation as opposed to our fade animation. One of the things that I would like to mention about our media widget, notice how these are changing at the same time. You can have multiple media widgets sync with each other. So again, as we're rotating through one piece of information, it's rotating everywhere else. So it really just makes it that much more dynamic. Again, we're just going to see it scroll through a couple different more articles, and then we're going to move on to the next page. Now this one is a little bit more visually pleasing. So this almost looks like exactly what you would see on a news feed. So as you can see, this is an example of bringing in a CNN World News article. This is going to be a template that is going to be publicly available on our server. So you will have the option to use this. But as you can see, all you would have to do is just click on these separate media widgets and say, I want to bring in CNN, ABC, Fox, etc. You could bring in different types of news depending on what you want to show. So I think that this is really cool and really just goes to show how dynamic we can make presentations. So again, just scrolling through different articles here that are on, I think this is just CNN World News, but you could do CNN US News, etc. Just depends on what you want to bring in and if it's through RSS.app or not.
One other thing, John, about RSS.app is that it allows you to bundle various different media RSS feeds. So if you wanted to bundle your Facebook and Instagram into one feed, you could do that with RSS.app.
Thank you, Rod. So that's going to be it for the demonstration today, everyone. We are going to leave it up for Q&A. I know that the media widget has a lot of properties and there's a lot to it. We are going to be coming out with different tutorials. And if you actually go to our YouTube page right now, I show you how to set one up for your first use of the media widget. So there are a lot of properties, but we're definitely going to walk you through that and help you use it for various different use cases. So yeah, I'll leave it up to Q&A.
Thanks, John. Any questions out there?
You can just go ahead and type those in the chat if you have them. Where is the Power BI widget? So if you go into your content editor, so this was a question from Andy McKee in the chat. It says, where is the Power BI widget? So it's going to be in our dynamic charts. If you don't see dynamic charts when you go into the content editor, that's because you haven't added a data source yet into your portal. So right, when I went into that data source menu, we saw a lot of data sources already in there. That's why I have this, but you'll have to add a data source before you'll see this widget here. Yes, we will be creating tutorials on Power BI. Yes. And that was from Robert Heiss. Thank you for your question. Any thoughts on how to avoid third-party software to build RSS feeds like RSS.app? Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of if you go to websites like news websites, they actually have RSS media feeds that they just provide publicly. The only reason I like to use RSS.app is because, again, when you bring that in, it just natively pops out all those fields. And then also it allows us to just do more advanced filtering. So like where I was hiding keywords and things like that, that's where I'm using RSS.app. But again, if you go to those news websites, you'll see just a list of those RSS feeds. You just may have to search RSS media feeds and then whoever news source you want to bring in or whatever use case. Andrew Brimmer, what level of Power BI Pro or Premium licensing is required to add Power BI to Wallboard? So you will need a Power BI Pro account. However, if you're doing a lot of data pulls, so let's say you're having it automatically scroll between many Power BI reports, that's counted as an embed on your account. And with a Pro subscription, you're only allotted so many a day. You can get a premium, but it has the same as Pro. But there is a premium 1 license, and that is called per capacity. So if you do have that advanced Power BI subscription, you can do, I don't believe it's unlimited, but you have a very large amount of Power BI pulls. There we go. Thank you, Robert. Yeah, so there's just a little bit more detail about, bringing in different RSS feeds. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you for that. All right. Do we have any more questions? I'll just give a couple more minutes here if you want to type them in the chat. And if not, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Is it only possible to connect content from social media by RSS.app is the question. So no, you can actually use a ton of different data sources. So if I go to RSS.app and I want to, let's say, create a new feed, you can see that they allow a lot of different types. So, right, I could bring in, news. I could bring in social media, Reddit, Google News. So I could compile news articles. And so I'll just
John,
scroll down here.
I think the question is can you access social media by something else other than RSS.app?
I don't believe so. Unless Instagram or Twitter offer like a native feature, I don't think so. You would have to use RSS.app in that use case. But maybe there's another software you could use potentially. Can you connect straight to an MS SQL server? Robert, would you mind helping out with that question? Can you connect straight to an MS SQL server? I don't know off the top of my head, but that is definitely something. If Robert doesn't know the answer, we can get back to you on. But I just don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. All right, let me go ahead and enable Robert's mic here if I can. There we go. You should be able to speak now, Robert.
And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Just briefly back to the RSS one first. we have checked so many RSS generator application that is, connecting to a third-party website and generates RSS from that one. We have checked at least 15 solutions, and it seems that the RSS.app is the best one. It is supporting more than 1,300 sources and generates the same structure of RSS. Of course, if you find another service that is generating the same structure, you can use that one. It is not required to use the RSS.app. And if you have a concrete question, please go ahead and email us, and we will also check it for you. Regarding the MS SQL server, we have sorry, I just wanted to be quick. We have a universal SQL Server connector that we can enable, and we can communicate to a database with a password and username. But the best is if your database provider generates an XML or JSON output when there is a change, and you just connect that to the Wallboard system. I think it's more secure, and the end customer will like it more. But if it is needed, we have a universal SQL Server connector that we can use.
Thank you, Robert. And just to show this, again, if you are interested in Power BI, they do have a free version, so you can use that. But this is if you want a large number of RSS feeds. So like if you're going to be providing these to clients, things like that, maybe you'd want to look into these different plans. For a connection to Power BI, how often does it authenticate your login credentials? Or is it a one-time login for Power BI and Wallboard to use the connected Power BI account?
Let me answer this one. The Power BI and also the Google authentication works in a way that when you authenticate in the browser, we are getting a token, a long-term token that we refresh, as far as I recall, twice a day or once a day only. That is stored only on the server side. Then the client application, so the media player or anything else, tries to turn to your Power BI item, whatever, a report or something like that, then it first turns to our server. With the long-term token, we get a short-term token that we pass back to the media player, and the media player uses that short-term token for the communication to Microsoft one. So I think, and basically this is the recommended way suggested by Microsoft too. So we don't store any user information, username and password, just the long-term communication token on the server side. And when the device needs a token for communication, it gets a different token, a short-term token, and the short-term token is also refreshed by our server and given to the media player only when it requests for a refresh.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for your question, Jonathan. All right. Any more questions?
Great job, John. Thanks everyone for attending. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye. Oh, we have a last minute question. Oh, thumbs up. All right. Thank you, y'all.